Story number 1, The Unforgiven Trial. What would you do if you could undo the past? What if a chance to make things right, to fix your mistakes, was put right in front of you? It's been a month since Rachel died. A month since everything came crashing down. I don't know why I was out there that night. Maybe I was trying to outrun the pain, the guilt, the endless feeling that I had failed her. I should have stopped her when she walked out. I should have told her I was sorry, but I didn't. And hours later, I got the call. A car accident. She never saw it coming. Just like that, she was gone. And there I was, driving alone in the middle of nowhere, my mind spinning with regret. But as I drove, I wasn't thinking about where I was going, or even where I'd been. I wasn't thinking about anything at all. That's when I saw him. A hitchhiker. He appeared out of nowhere, standing on the side of the road, his clothes old, his skin unnaturally pale. I didn't see him until the last second. I swerved and my car spun out of control. The sound of metal and glass tearing apart was deafening, then everything went black. When I came to, my head was spinning, and my body felt like it was crushed under a mountain of weight. The smell of smoke and burning rubber filled my nose, but there was something else. A cold, suffocating presence. I turned my head, and there he was, the man from the side of the road. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm, almost too calm. I couldn't answer. My heart was hammering in my chest. I couldn't think straight. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. Was I dead? "Who are you?" I whispered, my throat dry, my breath shallow. He took a step closer. "Someone who can help. Someone who can show you how to fix your mistakes." I stared at him, my body trembling. "What do you mean? Fix my mistakes? You want to undo what you've done, don't you?" His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. "You want to fix what happened to her. You want her back." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Yes," I croaked, barely able to breathe. "I would do anything." He smiled, an icy, knowing smile. "Then you'll play my game, a trial, a series of tests to prove that you've learned from your mistakes. Fail, and you'll never leave this place. Pass, and you'll have a chance to undo the past, to bring her back." I didn't hesitate. "I'll do it." He extended his hand, his fingers long and bony. The first trial begins now. The world around me shifted. The wreckage, the smoke, everything faded away. I was no longer in the car. I was back in our apartment. Rachel was there, standing across the room, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. She was holding the letter, the one I had never meant for her to find, the one I had been hiding for months. "You lied to me," she whispered, her voice trembling with hurt. "You promised you wouldn't keep secrets." I didn't know what to say. This was the moment I'd never been able to face. But now I was being forced to live it again. The hitchhiker's voice echoed in my head. Patience, understanding. I stepped forward, my heart racing, but this time, I didn't shut down. I didn't get defensive. I didn't yell. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice soft, but it was real. I should have been honest with you. I should have trusted you, and I should have put you first. Rachel's eyes softened, just a little, but she didn't forgive me. Not yet. But it was enough for the hitchhiker. He nodded once, his lips curling into a thin smile. Trial 1. Passed. Before I could speak, the world shifted again. We were sitting at the dinner table, the smell of pasta filling the air. Rachel was talking about her day, but my mind was elsewhere, already thinking of work, of everything else I had to do. But this time, I forced myself to listen. I let her speak. I didn't interrupt. I didn't dismiss her. She looked at me, surprised, but then a small smile tugged at her lips. The hitchhiker appeared again, standing next to me. his smile approving. Trial 2, patience. The trials continued, each one forcing me to face another failure. I had to relive moments where I should have been kinder, more understanding, moments where I should have listened, where I should have been there for her. Every trial felt like it cut deeper, but each time I passed, I learned a little more. Empathy, communication, compassion. Each test was harder than the last, but I fought to become the person she needed me to be. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the hitchhiker appeared for the last time. "You've passed the trials," he said, his voice softer now. "You understand what you did wrong. You're ready." I felt a flicker of hope. Does that mean she'll come back?" The hitchhiker's smile was cold. "You've learned. But remember, some things can never be undone. The past can't be erased. It can only be understood." And then, I was back. I woke up in the car, still wrecked, still alone. My chest ached, but it wasn't the same. The guilt was still there, but it was different now. I had learned. I had changed. And for the first time in a long time, I understood the price of the past. Rachel wasn't coming back, but I wasn't stuck anymore. I could live with what I'd done, and I would be better. But even now, I feel his eyes on me. The hitchhiker. Somewhere, out there in the darkness, watching, waiting. Story number 2, Whispers from Hollow Mountain. I don't know why I pulled over that night. I should have just kept driving. But something inside me, the same part of me that felt that oppressive silence, that suffocating fog, urged me to stop. Maybe I thought I could help. Maybe I thought the figure on the side of the road, standing alone in the freezing dark, wasn't as dangerous as it seemed. But I was wrong. The road was empty, silent. Not a single car had passed me for hours. Just a ribbon of asphalt winding through the mountains, swallowed by thick, unnatural fog. The kind of fog that wraps itself around you, seeps into your bones and makes you feel like the world is watching, like you're trespassing, intruding. I felt it the moment I turned onto that highway, but I brushed it off. It was late, and I was tired, but I was used to driving alone at night. It didn't help that the road was isolated, desolate, and wrong. I was somewhere deep in the mountains, far away from any towns, when I saw him, a hitchhiker, the first person I'd seen in hours. He was standing still on the side of the road, just waiting. The fog clung to his form, obscuring most of his details. His clothes were tattered, his hair a mess, and his face was obscured by shadows. But it was his eyes that caught me, dark, hollow, too intense. He was staring at me as if he already knew who I was, as if he had been waiting for me. I shouldn't have stopped. I knew that. I felt the warning in my gut, but I couldn't resist. I pulled over anyway. He didn't say anything as I opened the door for him. He just climbed in silently, his breath fogging up the glass as soon as he sat down. The temperature inside the car dropped instantly. The atmosphere thickened, a pressure I couldn't explain hanging in the air. He didn't speak for a while. He just sat there staring at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. Then finally he broke the silence. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Feel what?" I replied, trying to keep my tone light, trying to ignore the creeping dread. "The road's not right," he said. It never was. The words sent a chill down my spine. There was something about his voice, something knowing, like he had been here before, like he knew what I was feeling but couldn't say it aloud. I tried to shake it off, but my skin prickled. The fog outside seemed to grow thicker, curling around the car, swallowing it whole. The quiet stretched on, unbearable. And then, out of nowhere, he spoke again. "People don't pass through here. They don't get to leave. You've made a mistake." The tension in the car felt suffocating. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but I couldn't find my voice. And then, through the fog, I saw it. A gate. It wasn't just any gate. It was something wrong. Twisted. Made of gnarled branches. The kind of twisted wood you'd find in a nightmare. There were symbols carved into it. Some of them so old I couldn't make them out. But others were fresh, vivid in the fog, like they'd been burned into the wood recently. "Stop," the hitchhiker suddenly said, his voice a harsh whisper. "Don't go any closer." I felt the pull of the gate. Something was drawing me to it, an almost magnetic force. Against the hitchhiker's warnings, I stopped the car and got out. The air was colder than before, and it felt wrong. Wrong in a way I couldn't explain, but my body screamed at me to turn back. The hitchhiker was still in the car, his eyes wide now, pleading. "You don't understand, you can't go there." But I couldn't stop myself. I moved toward the gate, the symbols. They seemed to shift, moving, twisting as I drew closer. I could hear a low hum, like a distant whisper, coming from the gate itself. I could almost make out words, but they were muffled, unintelligible. And then I heard it. Deep, guttural, like a voice from beneath the earth. "Turn back!" I froze. When I looked back, the hitchhiker was gone. Gone. One moment, he was sitting in the car, and the next, there was nothing but shadows where he had been. But I didn't feel alone. The shadows didn't feel right. They stretched, twisted, reaching for me. The air was thick, suffocating. Something was closing in on me. I bolted back toward the car, my heart pounding, my breath ragged. But when I reached for the door, it slammed shut by itself. I tugged at the door, panic setting in, but it wouldn't open. I tried again, harder this time, but the car wouldn't budge. I was locked out. And then I looked up. The hitchhiker was standing at the edge of the road, a dark smile stretching across his face. It wasn't a smile of kindness or even malice. It was something deeper, something that chilled me to my core. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice hollow. "Now you'll never leave." The symbols on the gate began to shift, moving like living things, and they formed an arrow, pointing deeper into the mountain. I knew then. I wasn't on a road. I wasn't just lost. The mountain, the road, the gate, it was all part of something ancient, something alive, something that trapped those who wandered too far. And I had wandered too far. The last thing I remember is the sound of the fog rolling in, and the hitchhiker's dark, empty eyes following me into the suffocating dark. I don't know what happened to me after that. Maybe I'm still out there, lost in the fog, or maybe the mountain has claimed me. I'm not sure, and I don't think I want to know. But one thing is for certain. The mountain doesn't let people leave, not unless it wants them to. So, if you're ever driving alone at night and you find yourself on a forgotten mountain highway, turn around, don't stop, and whatever you do, don't pick up the hitchhiker. Story number 3, The Highway to Nowhere. It started with the sound of my car doors locking, a soft click that sent a jolt through my body. The hitchhiker I'd picked up just moments ago sat silently in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. His face was calm, too calm, like he knew something I didn't. Let me back up. I was driving home from a late-night study session at my friend's place. The highway was empty, the kind of desolation that makes you second-guess every shadow and flicker of movement in the distance. I had at least an hour to go when I spotted him, standing by the side of the road, his thumb outstretched. Normally I wouldn't have stopped. Who picks up strangers in the middle of the night? But something about him, maybe the slump in his shoulders, or the way he kept glancing over his shoulder, made me slow down. A small voice in the back of my mind told me to keep driving, but I ignored it. "Where are you headed?" I asked as he slid into the seat, his movements slow and deliberate. "Just up the road," he said, voice low, almost soothing. "Thanks for stopping. Not many people do." I smiled nervously, the unease already setting in. He was dressed plainly, jeans, a dark jacket. But there was something off about him. He didn't look at me as he spoke, just stared out the windshield like he'd been on this road 1,000 times before. The first few minutes were quiet, too quiet. I turned on the radio to fill the silence, but all I got was static. I flipped through station after station, but it was the same. Just white noise, like the world itself had gone silent. The hitchhiker tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. "You won't find anything out here," he said, his voice unsettlingly matter-of-fact. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He finally turned to look at me. His eyes were dark, not just in color, but in depth, as if they held secrets no human should ever know. "Do you believe in penance?" The question landed like a blow. "What?" "Penance," he repeated, his tone steady but insistent. "A price we pay for what we've done." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I don't know what you're talking about." He leaned back, letting out a low hum that seemed to vibrate in the air. "You will." From his jacket, he pulled out a photograph and handed it to me. I didn't want to take my eyes off the road, but something about the way he held it, calm, deliberate, made me glance down. My stomach dropped. It was a picture of a car, crumpled and twisted, like a crushed soda can. I recognized it instantly. It was the car from the accident I caused 5 years ago, the one I drove away from without looking back. "How did you?" My voice cracked. "You left it behind," he said, his voice sharp now, cutting through the stale air of the car. "That's impossible," I stammered. "No one else was there. You didn't look," he interrupted, his tone cold. "You didn't want to see." My chest tightened, panic clawing its way up my throat. I didn't mean to. Doesn't matter," he said, his voice flat, devoid of sympathy. "Meaning has nothing to do with it." The road ahead stretched endlessly, the same stretch of highway repeating over and over. The broken fence, the gnarled tree, the faded sign. Next gas, 50 miles. We had passed it 3 times already. "What's happening?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "You're not driving," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "You're remembering." I slammed my foot on the gas, but the car didn't respond. It was like the vehicle had a mind of its own, gliding silently down the endless road. The headlights flickered, and the world plunged into darkness. My pulse thundered in my ears. When the lights came back on, the hitchhiker was gone. The passenger seat was empty, but his voice lingered, soft and menacing. "You can't outrun what's already inside you." The road began to twist, the pavement warping into shapes that defied logic. Shadows spilled onto the car, coalescing into ghostly figures. They surrounded me, faces flickering with pain, anger, and betrayal. "You left us," one of them hissed, their voice low and guttural, like the sound of gravel scraping against metal. "We waited," another whispered, their face half-formed, eyes burning with accusation. Among them, a woman stepped forward, her features clearer than the rest. She held a child by the hand. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized her, the woman from the other car. The child's face was pale, his small eyes staring into mine, empty yet knowing. "No!" I screamed, clutching the wheel as if it could shield me from their judgment. "I didn't know! I didn't mean to!" "You didn't look!" The hitchhiker's voice rang out, calm yet echoing with finality. He was no longer beside me, but now among the shadows, standing behind the woman and child. "You never wanted to see." "I'm sorry," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. "I was scared. I didn't know what to do." Sorry isn't enough, he said, his form now shifting, his features melding with those of the shadows. Sorry doesn't bring us back. The car shuddered, the engine growling like a caged animal. Ahead, the road opened into a blinding light. For a moment, I thought it was salvation. I gritted my teeth, bracing for impact, hoping it would end. But when the light faded, I was back at the start, parked on the shoulder of the same desolate highway. The clock on the dashboard hadn't moved. The photograph lay on the passenger seat, edges curling as though aged by fire. Relief surged through me, fragile and fleeting, until I glanced in the rearview mirror. He was there, sitting in the back seat, his presence oppressive, his eyes boring into mine with an intensity that pinned me in place. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, the woman and child stared, their faces half lit in the glow of the dashboard. "Drive," the hitchhiker said, his voice layered with the whispers of countless others. The car moved without my consent, the wheels turning as though pulled by an unseen force. The shadows spilled out across the highway, stretching endlessly into the distance. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. "Where are we going?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "To where you belong," he replied, his tone both a promise and a sentence. "And you'll drive until you understand." The world outside the car dissolved into darkness, leaving only the endless road ahead, the faint cries of the shadows and the relentless hum of the engine. And so I drove, the photograph a silent witness, the figures in the backseat, my constant companions. The road stretched on, unyielding, a highway to nowhere. But in the pit of my soul, I knew the truth. I wasn't driving. I was paying. Thank you for joining us tonight. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you stay up to date on all our latest spooky stories. If you got a good scare, be sure to like the video and share it with your friends if you think they can handle it. And don't forget to leave us a comment telling us which story left you looking over your shoulder.